Good morning, everyone. My name's Louise Taylor and I'm a Partnerships Director with Hive Learning. And I started working in the space of leadership development and culture change pre-Facebook. And what I began to see was just how expensive that can be and not always effective. And as I saw new technologies emerging, I realised that while there was potential for amazing change at scale, it was definitely not a silver bullet. So part of the reason why I joined Hive Learning was because I could see that there was this sense of there's no new unicorn product, and also that there was something they were doing right in terms of partnership. So on that note, I'm really delighted to have here today two clients from Hive Learning, John Shurmer from Barclays and Sam Fospha, CEO, to talk more about this topic. So first of all, would you like to introduce yourselves a bit, and John, and talk about some of the big challenges that you've been looking to solve with learning technology?
Yeah, of course. So morning everyone. My name is I'm John Shurmer. So I look after digital learning for Barclays UK, and I also head up. Is that working? No? Okay. Okay. Use this. That's better? Technology people. Okay now? Yeah, great. Yeah, so I'm head of digital learning for Barclays UK. So I look after all our digital learning products, something we've been investing in over the last 4 or 5 years. And I also look after projects that go across the whole of Barclays Group. In terms of Barclays Learning and kind of what our big challenges are with technology, I think for me, you know, I don't see the technology as the solution. I see it as an enabler. In reality, for our people, it's actually pretty fragmented for them. Learning is pretty tough. They've got lots of places to go. They find it quite confusing, and actually, new shiny things aren't always the right thing for them. So our mission is make it simple. Make it work, make it easy, make it engaging, make it rewarding, and that's what we find really works in terms of bringing our learners in. Then for our business, help them to have the visibility, the data and the confidence that we're working on the skills they need for the future. And we probably bring to life a little bit of how we're doing that.
Thanks, Tom. It's like Battle of the Bands with the stage over there. I'm Sam Carter, I'm the CEO of Fospha. So we're a technology business helping marketers leverage data science to grow customer lifetime value and improve ROI. As a technology business with sort of 25% data scientists, 25% data engineers, one of the things I realized quite early on in my journey at Fospha was that a lot of these guys they really exist at the sort of the intersection of academia and commerce. Like, you know, for engineers, for techies generally, you know, making money is not necessarily the biggest motivation. It's continuous learning. So creating an environment that really sort of baked that into the foundations was pretty key for us. The second challenge, sort of top of mind, was in that sector as well. Diversity and inclusion is a pretty massive challenge, and most of the sort of the perceived way, like wisdom around addressing it didn't really seem to work. And so top of our mind was how do we sort of disrupt what was really an organisation of entirely blokes with a sort of a preconception that we couldn't hire women and diverse and inclusive backgrounds because of the space that we worked in. So we sort of wanted to challenge that, and that was a bit of the motivation for our journey.
Great. Good. Can you hear me? Is that okay? Yeah. So John, I know that you've been focused on achieving some quite specific outcomes for your learners, and you often talk about having a test and learn approach. Would you like to tell me a bit more about how you've done that and some of the challenges you've had along the way?
Yeah, sure. Actually, so test and learn is obviously the word at the moment. Who in the audience is doing test and learn? A few people. Yeah. So, you know, we kind of decided about 4 years ago that actually we were going to do stuff differently to how we'd done it in the past. So we were going to stop launching products and leaving it, and we were going to stop saying we've got a lovely curriculum over here that works, and we were going to start to really kind of create much more of a collaborative partnership with our organisation in terms of how we build stuff from the ground up. So we So we fundamentally adopted agile development as an approach moving forward. But I think this has also become one of the most misunderstood processes. It doesn't mean do the same thing faster. It doesn't mean deliver the whole functionality. It's about really kind of collaborating with your organisation to deliver specific outcomes. So for us, what does that look like in practical terms? Well, when we approach anything now, we approach it with a really clear outcome statement of what we want to achieve, either a hypothesis or a problem statement or a vision. You know, when we started working with Hive, actually it was quite an interesting thing for us, because our hypothesis was actually, could we crack social learning? I mean, we think that social learning is potentially one of the most exponential opportunities, but we were finding it really hard. We were using some skills inside our organisation, some tools inside our organisation. We tried things with event apps, and they just fundamentally hadn't worked for us. You know, engagement would drop off after a period of time, and actually as a learning function we felt really quite clumsy in how we were engaging with our learners. So we worked with an organisation to say, actually, could we do something small? Could we try something out, you know, which was in a safe environment, and see if we can actually challenge that paradigm and change that conversation internally. So what we did with that is we agreed to do 3 micro sprints, so literally 30-day projects, and we weren't interested in big high outcomes, we weren't interested in transmitting that across the organisation. We were interested in getting some data and some insight on what we were doing. So we picked people that we could fail with. Okay, and that is a real art. It's in the conversation. If someone's got a big objective on their head for delivering something, you're probably test and learning in the wrong place. Okay, you want to find people that are kindred spirits, that want to be the first to break new ground, that want to be involved in it. So we'd get the culture right. We'd also run really fast. We wouldn't build huge products. We would start with absolutely what is the bare bones. What can we string together to put an experience together and test it straight away. And then what we learned straight away from that is nothing ever works out of the box. And the reason that a lot of the curriculums that I think we put out to our learners don't resonate is because we don't keep talking to them. So even with a brilliant cutting edge tool, which is mobile, where people can learn on the go, there were still lots of engagement gaps, and that's when we got our screwdriver out. We started to understand what is the data, what's stopping people, what social safety do they need to feel like they can engage, what are the dynamics around it. So it's kind of effectively we've taken a digital product management model and applied it to learning and put the skill sets around it. And actually for us, we've changed on that particular project, it's one of many, we've changed the internal narrative. So the internal narrative has gone from this is never going to work to I can see some data points, and now we're looking at next steps.
Very interesting. Thanks, John. And Sam, while John has been trying out innovative new learning technologies, you've been looking at a specific people problem. Can you share a bit more about how you approached that and the journey that you had along the way?
So it was definitely back to the diversity inclusion challenge. I suppose some sort of troubling questions that we asked ourselves last year. There's an enormous amount of focus on gender diversity because that was our most immediate visible problem in the organisation. It came to and we thought we did a pretty good job, and some structured learning, like continuing to be kept on the agenda. But it came to Pride Month, and we really wanted to do something to celebrate that we were really pushing on and being a diverse and inclusive team. And a few of the team pushed back and said we hadn't really done anything of substance. And we thought we'd done a few things. We pushed a few buttons over the course of the year, but I think I heard it described as not being able to walk and chew gum at the same time a few weeks ago. Like we should be able to do more than one thing at the same time. So the notion of always having something on the agenda. I would definitely agree with John that treating it in a modular way, structured learning, but keeping it on the agenda. That's why something like Hive was particularly relevant to us, because just actually having something in there with the materials always available. Even for the people who aren't really, there are streams of learners, I'll talk about it in a bit, who, some people blitz through and heavily engage with the content. Others actually less so, but even for them, it was still kind of significant. So this notion of continuous social learning really helps with something like diversity and inclusion, where you shouldn't really have to deal with one thing at once, right? You really want to hardwire the sort of basic foundations of like diversity and inclusion into your organization, and it's such an intrinsic motivator when you do. And I think that probably the big thing for us was there's a lot of conversation about whether you should link diversity and inclusion to the business case, and whether actually that's sort of a little bit cynical in itself. I think for us it was more not a business case, and I think there's tons of reports, and McKinsey one that productivity does go up. For us, it was just actually creating an environment that people wanted to work in, not necessarily a direct link to the business case, but just that intrinsic motivation of wanting to work in an environment with people who had similar views. So for us, just the act of having this thing on the agenda and continuing to push it over the course of the year, it just being there for even people who weren't engaging with it hugely was massively significant for us in improving the work culture, and that sort of stuff comes through, and then it's on Glassdoor. That then makes recruitment easier, and everything else kind of follows. So it's been hugely successful, just being there actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing about often things like unconscious bias training can become a must-do, or compliance, and how can you actually get people engaged and wanting to go in? Yeah. Okay. So naturally with any kind of implementation of technology, there's a level of change management. Can you tell me a bit more, John, about how you've approached that?
Yeah, sure. So I think with adopting digital tools, I think you can often get drawn into. We're so used to in our lives, we've got these phones, and everything is really, really intuitive, and you don't need to be trained on anything. You've heard that before. You buy something now, there's no user guide, or there's a little quick tips guide. And I think if you really want to adopt something and you want to make it go across your organisation, you've got to think it through, and you've got to really understand, at a basic usability level, what are the barriers? Actually, one of the things we found was from a change management. I'll go on to the kind of the broader change management in a second, but just from basics, people get stuck with stuff. Okay, so when we do a lot of our work, we don't just pay attention to the high order objectives. We also pay attention to the usability, to the technical, to the can I access it. I'm sure there's lots of people who work in complex organisations with firewalls, with all sorts of technology. As a learning professional, we didn't have to look at that stuff in the past. We absolutely have to look at it now, because the success of our adoption is based on people just being able to access it in the right way. So that's the first point. I think the second thing, which is sometimes it's a change for I think our profession, is moving from an environment and these tools, and Sam was talking about always having it on the agenda. We're moving from these kind of releases of content, releases of a new tool, a new thing that we then send an email out, and the engagement model is completely different. So for every one of our products, Hive is one vendor that we're working with. For our own internal products, every single product has a content roadmap. Okay, so we go in planned with what are we releasing at what point of the year, and what are we going to say about it. One of the things that was really interesting is we did some test and learn work on what's the impact of talking about the content, and we've got content rating systems, and what we worked out was content that we talk about, and we talk about setting context rather than it just sitting on a page, was rated higher, was accessed more, and was used more, and was shared more. So having an active content management approach is really, really important. Then when you move into kind of social, the stakes are even higher, right? So it's not you're going to do 12 things a year, it's you're going to do 12 things a week. You need to be in there. You can't do it at arm's length. So if there's a conversation going on and you want to manage learning, you're managing learning in that moment. And actually, if you kind of have a look at yourself for a second as a learning professional, you're kind of ready for that. We found we weren't. We found that we needed to bring new skills into the business that had that campaign, that marketing feel to them, because we found that we were quite hesitant. We were overthinking the answer when actually we needed more of a social media mindset in how we worked. So we've kind of managed engagement, managed the change through multiple things, from the basics all the way through to paying attention to the data, the blocks, and then actively managing and engaging our audience.
Very good. Sam?
I'll carry on, hijack the mic. Just probably one thing to add on the change management piece, and it is diversity inclusion specific as well, but it probably transcends topic, and that's that nobody wants to talk about it in the first place. It's like, I mean, the first session where I stood up to articulate that we were launching this diversity inclusion training, I mean, I just lost the ability to speak, because it's a minefield, and so barely able to do it myself, then expecting that some sort of classroom-based or some sort of session-based management training would be the affected sort of delivery method that was obviously flawed. I think I'd liken the sort of the process with diversity inclusion. It is a mindset shift, and it requires a thought. So it needs that guided long-term. It just needs to needs to be on the agenda. It needs to be slow. Like it doesn't work Clockwork Orange style, having your eyes tied back and being subjected to shock therapy. Right? I mean, it might be a good starting point, but actually it is this. It is a much more, I think for us anyway, it required a much more organic, guided process over a longer period. The natural thought, gradually getting people talking about it. So really a perfect topic for social learning in that respect.
Good. And Sam, so your business, not ready now. So your business really specialises in data science and helping companies to make better marketing decisions. What do you think learning professionals could learn that you've adopted on this particular program in that area?
So we try and help our clients realise that they have loads of IP hidden away in data that they're not unlocking, in marketing specifically, that's people are heavily dependent on ad tech providers, Google, Facebook, etc. And the idea that it's not their data, it's Google's data, it's Facebook's data. And so the first thing we do with our clients is try and sort of dispel that. And there's a lot of owned data that for most organizations is hidden away, it's siloed, it's not joined up, it's not, basically most organizations lack the data capabilities and skills to really unlock the value from that. I think probably the relevance here is with that mindset that you have this sort of hidden IP everywhere, you start thinking about like learning technology, for example, being a source of potential valuable IP. I think another misconception in organizations is that all of the data and all of the IP needs to be pointed at the kind of core business case. So, if I'm an insurance provider, it's all on sort of decisioning science around insurance rates. And unless the sort of the organisation in a more broader sense. So the thing I would kind of encourage organisations to do, and the thing that we would do with our learning technology platform, is see it as a valuable source of IP. I mean, it's not really an accident that Google has become number one business in the world, founded on selling ads, but having built this unbelievable culture where they've put sort of there's an enormous amount of retained value in the culture they've built, and the IP in HR and learning development that's developed along the way. The thing that we find hugely valuable is this source of information. The moment you start embracing learning technology, you're collecting data on your staff, on their progress, on their the profiles, the different streams and rates of learning. And that's incredibly valuable as an asset to go and use and try and, firstly you actually know what's going on so you can develop some of the stuff around them, but also, an enormous amount of information that is yours, it's your employees. So sort of always a nice byproduct of adopting technologies is really thinking about that data as potential future IP.
Okay. And John, I know for you, data has been a key source of how you can unlock value for your learners. Do you want to talk a bit more about how you've applied that in Barclays?
Yeah, sure. So, data is a big deal, and obviously a massive topic. So I think the first thing, what we're not talking about, something you're doing after the event. I think I touched on that in the last answer. It's there and it's real. So going back to the original piece around kind of test and learn, and to give you a real example, when you're working with a social platform, for example, it's almost viewing it like you're doing mini experiments and you're working out what the engagement metric is that you get from them. So that's a lot of the work that we do, is kind of very in the moment and entrepreneurial about how can we achieve it. So to give you an example, if we post in this way from this person, what is the engagement metric that comes out of it? And you start to get this kind of mindset to say, okay, so how can we do it? How can we make it better? So one thing we paid attention to give you a practical example, by reviewing the data, we worked out that if we could get everyone onto the platform within the first 5 days, having set up a profile and having contributed, then we got much better engagement rates throughout the length of the program, because they were boarded early. They hadn't built up any barriers. Okay, so what we then did was say, okay, that's interesting. How can we get better at onboarding people onto the program? So we used the insight to say, let's have a conversation with them. Let's make sure the briefing is right for them. So not just briefing them for no purpose. We kind of had baby steps rather than big steps to get them to make those first contributions, to really kind of help them. So we pay attention to the data. I think the other thing is there's too much data. So when you start to work with, if you work with a Hive or any number of digital platforms, I mean, the guys at Hive presented us with a 40-page document with so many learner dynamics that and I was like so excited, but then actually turning it into something actionable. So super interesting to know what device people are getting to learning from. Super interesting to know what time of day is peak. That helps us with posting, but actually we had some fundamental questions as well. So we worked that 40 pages down into 2 of the key metrics that matter. So you've got to, one, really embrace the data, but also work out what your meaning is within it. I think the one other point I'd make is don't make all your decisions just based on the data, because data is only data. You build insight. So we couple it with also doing user experience feedback, and we've learned this by working with our digital banking teams who build the mobile app, the Barclays mobile app, around user experience testing. And to give you a good example, we were doing some user experience testing where we do deep dive interviews with some of our learners, and one of our Hive learners, we had them down as disengaged, completely disengaged learner. We did a one-to-one interview with that person. Yes, they were disengaged with the experience, and that was something we needed to unlock. But they were talking to every single person in their team about it. They were sharing the materials from the program around it. They just didn't feel comfortable doing it online. Okay, so that was something that we wanted to unlock, but we worked out that we can't just say engagement is 1 + 1 = 2. You might get 3 if you answer it in that way.
And that's very interesting. So it goes beyond the numbers and actually starting a conversation and then shaping how you engage with that person based on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. All right, so just any questions from the floor? Like to ask John or Sam? No, just one.
Or we can keep going.
Yeah. So John, I mean, I know a lot of people are nervous about social learning. They think, what happens if I build it and then they don't come, and they don't start these conversations? What advice would you recommend to people that are hesitating about that? And what value do you think it brings that makes it worthwhile?
It's great. It's a great question. So I'd go back to a couple of the earlier answers. If you're hesitant or you're feeling like, is this an area we want to step into? You don't. If you start big, you might start something that you can't control. So start small is the first piece in there. But going to why did we want to look at it? I mean, I talked to you before about we'd got an internal narrative which was it wasn't going to work, so we wanted to put some data behind it. But why did we put the effort in? There are a few reasons, because why wouldn't you want to go from binge learning in classrooms followed up by emails and massive effort of people to try and string programs together, which is our traditional learning model, to in the moment bursts of learning, more user-centric, and one of the hidden benefits is we're able to connect our learners on an ongoing basis to our facilitators and our trainers. So we can have autonomous groups having conversations, but we can also keep that conversation there. We can keep bringing in new stimulus. We can learn what's working for them. So I think that for us there's this complete connectivity of the whole experience. We're still on a journey. I'm not going to say that we're at an outcome yet. We're still exploring it. But if you're hesitant, I would be brave and give it a go. Yeah. If you start small, you create a safe environment. What's the worst that can happen?
I think just following on social learning again through the diversity and inclusion lens, but more broadly as well. I mean, I read this thing. I'll have to be fact checked on this, but so don't anyone tweet these directly before fact checking it. There's something like in 5 years, 85% of the workforce will be millennials, and they both should really care about particularly the social things, diversity and inclusion top of the agenda, but also really, I mean, I think the non-polite way of saying it is bullshit, right? They're happy to talk about this stuff as well, right? They want to. I think I'm a millennial technically, so I can get away with that. So having some forum, some platform where people feel like they can express themselves, where it's not confined and contained to a classroom type environment, where the foundation's there, I think is going to become really key to being able to acquire and retain talent. We're already seeing it, that this sort of that the ability to express oneself through this is a little bit more profound than it maybe was, and that's, I think, pretty key to sort of maintaining a future millennial workforce.
Very good. And so what's next for you now, John, on your learning agenda?
So a whole set of things. I mean, I think for us, we've been bitten by the bug. We're not going back. We were bitten actually quite a while ago by the bug. You know, I think that there is so much opportunity that for everyone in learning, you've got to jump in. You know, you've got to jump into digital, and you've got to make some plays and work out what works for your organisation, and it'll be different for one organisation for another. I'm not going to say do this, that or the other. For us, we just see a massive opportunity. I go back to what I said originally around wanting things to be simple and easy and engaging and rewarding for our learners. So we're really focused on that experience. So actually a lot of our work is about stripping out the complexity, building one place to go, creating connected experiences like Hive that we've talked about here that can really add value. But also pivotal for us is bringing in the skills we need in learning. So, you know, we've invested in a few areas. I think I mentioned that, you know, we brought data and analytics into our team, we've brought user experience into our team, we brought content marketing into our team, but now our next job is to fuse that with the traditional skill sets and make that a really powerful mix so we get the right content to the right audience. So lots of opportunity, and look forward to having a chat with a few people here.
Great.
And next for us, so I think the two key themes I pull out are modern businesses, as they become increasingly technology-led, have to exist more and more at the intersection between academia and commerce to stimulate those technologically minded people who come out of academia and want to continue to learn. So maintaining a kind of a professional learning stream and evolving its a top priority with the second stream of this kind of, I guess, social awareness around diversity and inclusion, and keeping that on the agenda as the two kind of critical components in learning to sort of continue to grow our workforce and keep them excited and motivated.
Great, thank you. Well, taking away quite a lot from this, I think the key thing for me has been that idea of what we can borrow from marketing in terms of really understanding the data and making sure we're very focused on the individual learner, their behaviour, and iterating based on that. Starting small and then growing from there and adapting along the way based on what we're learning. And I love that idea of creating a playbook for what works in this organisation with these learners based on what we're learning. So if you'd like to hear more about what Hive Learning is doing with clients like Barclays and Fospha, and I think, are you guys going to stick around for a bit? Speak with John and Sam. We'll be at stall L38.